Hi again. In the chapter Establishing a Worldwide Theocracy in 30 Years a Watchtower Slave, William Schnell has been talking about the death of Rutherford and how the new third tier of Watchtower leadership in Brooklyn were expanding very rapidly their building work, but also their training work, the building of Gilead and the Theocratic ministry school and all those developments that developed in the 1940s and were continuing well through my era in the Watchtower and beyond, although they've changed quite a bit in recent years. But anyway, it served a great function of getting the witnesses into an advanced zone of indoctrination. Before that, they were zealous but ill-educated even in their own history. Now they're, again, of course, ill-educated in their own history, but their zeal, at least in the decades between 1940s and 1980s, was accompanied by a fair level of literacy, on a very superficial level, but enough to impress the average person behind a door that you might call on. And that was a new development that was only possible after Rutherford was dead, because he wasn't much interested in educating his Jehovah's Witnesses. So here, the final section of that chapter, Establishing a Worldwide Theocracy, is about their international missionary work. All the graduates, that is of Bethel, and of course now the new Gilead School, were actually biding the time when visas for foreign countries could be obtained. After all, the society was setting its sights on becoming a New World Society. Since the war was still raging in Asia and Europe, the society concentrated largely on South and Central America. That is why the first classes of the college included Spanish in the curriculum. Upon making the first assignment in Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Central America, the witnesses soon found that the economic and sanitary level there was such that Americans could not live under such conditions and remain healthy. The society wisely decided on purchasing or renting missionary homes. In these foreign fields, it installed the Bethel system. That is, the society gave a minimum of financial support, which had to be augmented by the contributions the missionaries received by practicing the Watchtower religion of buying and selling Watchtower books, booklets, and magazines. The missionaries in the foreign fields used the same methods as we employed in the American section of the theocracy. They first sought to establish a nucleus, however small. Next, they concentrated on the buying and selling routine. Then, slowly, they introduced the 7-step brainwashing indoctrination program. In this manner, the work began to expand into the world, and the society moved toward the goal of becoming the world religion. Now, next he talks about missionary motives. Jesus left these parting instructions to his church. Go ye therefore into all the world and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them into the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe whatsoever I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always. The Watchtower Society, already in 1922, had set out to preach the gospel of the kingdom, but they did not do so to disciple the nations, that is, to bring them to Christ as brethren, or equals before the throne of grace. No, they did so to gain money, to make the organization strong and powerful, and to gain prestige for the organization. With feigned words, they made merchandise of men. After 1931, they developed the scheme of unspiritual Jonadabs so that they could gather a vast multitude of hewers of wood and carriers of water, slaves of the theocracy. Their motive, thus, was going out into all the world is not to baptize them unto Jesus Christ, but to initiate them into the theocracy. Not to teach them all things whatsoever Jesus Christ commanded his disciples to do, but to force them as slaves to perform Watchtower service, to put grievous burdens on those who are already heavy laden, and thus to enslave them twofold. Watchtower slaves are now being multiplied by the tens of thousands throughout all the world, and this slave society of Jonadabs is the pattern for the New World Society envisaged by the Watchtower Society. This, of course, is from the perspective of 1956, when the organization was growing very rapidly, mind you, but nothing compared to what it did after Schnell left between 1956 and 1975 or 80. There is now in the building the third tier of the Watchtower, or the third phase of the Watchtower Society. The first phase was under the dictatorship of Russell from 1879 to 1916, with a wound unto death between 1916 to 1919. Then the second Watchtower Society from 1919 to 42 under the dictatorship of Judge Rutherford, under whose tenure the society became the faithful and wise servant class. And finally, the third and present Watchtower Society from 1942 to 2942, so they hope, for 1,000 years, a neural society, a class society ruled dictatorially by a consortium of self-perpetuating directors. In the building and erection of this huge edifice, or the theocracy of 1938, the Watchtower Society hopes, by the practice of its religion of buying out time out of individual lives for their purposes and making them report that time spent to them, and of selling books, booklets, and magazines for them and bring in the contributions, to draw millions of the earth into slavery to it, cracking its theocratic whip over their hapless backs, as generation cometh and generation goeth for the next 1,000 years. And he asks at the end of this chapter, will they succeed? Next chapter, who is the big bad wolf? I'll put in a link to a video Vivian shot. Why haven't we heard of these famous missionaries? You would think by modern propagandists for the Watchtower that they're the only people in the world concerned with missionary work. Well, Vivian put this video together from our project that we put together for sending to the society when we didn't know what to do, and we had learned the truths about the history of the society. She was learning new truths, though, about what Christendom had already done, what the missionaries of China, of the churches had been up to, especially in the century or so before the Watchtower was founded. So, why haven't we heard of these famous missionaries when we're Jehovah's Witnesses? See you next time.